Welcome to another day of PMPL Analysis. It's day 2 of week 2 of the league play. Thank you very much once again to everybody for watching the videos and providing feedback, showing the support. I'm not going to waste any more time. Enjoy the clips, enjoy the analysis, and let's jump into it. First clip of the day is a small one, but just to give a shout out to Steelshot from Venom Esports and the composure he held on to pull off a 1v2 against the members of Seal Esports. Now, it was definitely a mistake from Seal in terms of pushing into the building pretty much one by one, but you can see the setup of the two teams as they both drop around in the cow compound. Baron is there kind of covering a little bit of Void and Mamba, but Steelshot is definitely on his own. Killa and Zaki are together, so they have the ultimate opportunity of kind of pushing Venom, because realistically, because of that wall there, Mamba and Void are less likely to be able to get to the aid of their teammate, unless they obviously push Baron on their own. But you can see Zaki uses the TPP perspective, as well as obviously hearing the footsteps of Steelshot, should I say. It's an initially solid Molotov from Zaki, but this is where the mistake that Killa makes, right? To me, it shouldn't have been a molly in through that doorway. It should have been a molly somewhere like on that side of the wall, so it would have suppressed Steelshot a little bit more. And with, after throwing the molly, he could have pushed out the window and joined up with Killa. However, you see initially, Steelshot gets knocked, and hey, Vector Power, I'm a massive fan of that gun, and Steelshot used it wisely. He's able to reload, and while reloading, he does a great job of staying peeked a little bit more behind the corner of the building. I'm even going to slow this down. You can see, there you go. I'll pause it right. As he's reloading, he moves from the left to the right just to get that third person perspective, and you can see that he's very heavily prepared for Zaki in that sense. So he reloads. He goes for the pre-fire. He does take a little bit of a risk, pre-firing kind of so heavily with the Vector, but he stops right on time. And although Zaki goes for the jump shot, Steelshot with the 12 bullets left gets a second knock and confirms the 2 kills. So individually, very good composure from Steelshot, but also a mistake from Seal and how they pushed that pretty much solo. It could have been pulled off, and it was a little bit presumptuous. This clip is once again a little bit of a smaller one, but it is to show the evolution of i8's gameplay and kind of focus compared to yesterday's games. I had talked to Uzum yesterday over Instagram DM, and I had highlighted a couple of perspectives from my point of view on how the team should be maybe focusing better in some parts of the game, and just doing a little bit of a better job of securing their late game position, as well as obviously more points for their team. And this is phase 5. They've been rotating through these circles really well, by the way. I noted that. But you're getting towards the end of phase 5, and it's very easy for the team to possibly ignore a team coming in to prioritize a bit more of the circle. But by forcing this fight against 7C and making them suffer a lot more heavily to the blue, they're able to get a clean squad wipe. They do still have one player in the inside edge of the circle, but it's between a fantastic nade by Crypto to knock down Ale. One of the other 7C's players was taken out by i8 earlier on. Smokey and Fear can't really do too much in this area. It's a lovely knock once again from i8. It's one of those things where they focus on the fight, but they also make sure to not get tunnel visioned and suffer too heavily from the blue. So they really balance the blue and the edge of the circle in the next phase wonderfully. What that affords them to do, because they've done the damage on the 7Cs, it allows them to then focus on what's in front of them. As opposed to if they had moved a little bit earlier, given space for 7Cs to creep in maybe just about in the edge of the circle, they might have been screwed by 1 or 2 players from 7Cs in the final moment. So that's just really good focus and awareness from i8, and they ended up going on to take the game in a pretty solid fashion, especially as a duo. So yeah, good stuff from i8. For this clip in game 2, I want to highlight the fight between R3D and Raw. Now, R3D were coming into this area from their drop spot. So Raw had been here for a little bit of time and they'd already settled themselves up in this position. Now, I want to make note of Raw's positioning as a team. It is absolutely fantastic. That 2-1-1 split, you could argue it's even a 2-2, but let's call it a 2-1-1, is pretty spot on because that player in the back line, okay, is covering behind him when he needs to, but he's also supporting his teammate on the edge of the hill. And the 2 players in the compound have that fantastic elevated position which overlooks the top of the hill and really peaks up, and it really negates the need for anybody to actually be that far forward to where Hassan is driving, which means there's much less chance that if somebody was on the tip of that hill that they get caught out. So it's really the best of both worlds with Raw's positioning. So R3D initially do a little bit of scouting, just a tiny bit, in vehicles, mind you. So that noise has been made and that alerts Raw quite heavily, which is why you see the arrow pointing from the backline player of Raw. Instead of looking behind him, he's looking to support his teammate. Sada attempts to reposition and Bishal does a great job of sticking and staying composed at the peak of the hill. Anubis, who is, as far as I know, the IGL of R3D, pushes in first, right? And that's not a bad spot for him to push into. It's not bad, along with Hassan. I credit R3D for that little bit of play. But here's the biggest mistake they make. They might have an idea that a team is there, hence why they're stopping, but they aren't doing the relevant amount of scouting and spreading out. Again, Bishal does a great job of staying composed and just being that trigger disciplined player that he can be. Joker gets shot at a couple of times, so they absolutely know a team is there. And although I get that the team are full sending it, once again, without relevant scouting, without relevant information gathering, it's an instant caught out. And Bishal takes advantage of that, gets one, peeks back behind the hill, blah, 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 from the elevated position, gets a second knock, and it's an instant turnaround by Raw based on the spread that they have. And they look to take advantage of that. Anubis looks to heal up. However, he's staying where he is, so he's going to take damage. Like, if you're going to try and get a first aid off and you've already exposed your position, you back off a bit and then you go for a first aid because you're asking for a nade to be thrown in your face. 3 players down, and R3D know that there's only 1 player left up, so Bishal baits him out. The supporting fire sends him back. Bishal gets a squad wipe. The composure and teamwork from Raw with the initial positional setup is absolutely fantastic. But it was also made quite easy to execute from poor scouting, poor information gathering from R3D. In this clip, I need to highlight the really poor decision making from Paradox off the back of what initially looked like some really solid learning on rotations from the Australian team. They started out by dropping on the kind of a little bit of a mansion shelter split drop, and based on that phase 1 circle, because I'd been talking to the boys in VC and I'd given them some perspectives, I'd shown them some mistakes that they'd been making, providing some context and just some feedback. And they had listened to it initially and they started rotating pretty damn early into phase 1. And with that kind of phase 1 where the river is in play, you tend to not want to go too deep into the northern half of the river. If you're going to go to the northern half of the river and you want to go kind of central of the circle, you tend to want to go a little bit down towards the edge of the river. So Paradox's original rotational spot that they stopped in on phase 1 isn't too bad. I would argue that they should have kept a little bit more on that northeastern edge of the circle. However, they opted to go there. It's not the worst thing in the world. But phase 2 pops up, and you can see on the phase 2 shift where it goes down south. Paradox have come from the east. In theory, they've already gathered a relevant amount of information from the eastern side. Plus, because they play from the east, they should be a little bit more confident of teams who drop around them on the east of their pathing lines, right? So my initial thought was, we'll go roughly back in the direction you came from, stick a little bit more down on towards the northeast of this phase 2, go to the kind of the northern edge of the tip of the river, the tadpole area that I call it, and hang around there for a little bit. Get a good core position because the phase 2 shift is fantastic. But instead, what they do is they rotate to the west, an area of this circle that they are in no way informed about, that they have no valid information on, and they instantly get caught out by PN crew. And they have to scatter away. At this point, they've already lost one player. Wiz has had to disband on foot in the open of shooting range. You have Queet, and then I think give the IGL further around there. I believe that's him there. And they've already lost a player simply because they rotated in a direction that they were not familiar with, in a part of the circle where they had no real information. Because you try and get information from where they were in phase 1 to shooting range hill, you're getting little to nothing. So why rotate in that direction? It's not needed, especially when, you know, you could easily go back to where you were. Like, they could have gone up to that hill there. They could have gone to that compound there, right? Because they come from that direction. They had plenty of opportunity on that phase 2, shifting up straight away. But instead, they went in a direction and they got taken out. I believe they ended up overall losing their squad within a very short time, or at least 3 of their players. I believe Give was able to kind of disengage away onto the north of Severny. But my point is, that kind of decision making is not going to get you anywhere. Stick to the area of the map that you probably should be most familiar with. So in this clip of game 2, I just want to break down how Venom had the opportunity to be a lot more aggressive and third party this fight between Raw and Stalwart. Venom had been in this position since the previous phase, starting on a little bit of the kind of north side of the river, then they moved down to the south side, but they'd been here for a little bit of time. And yes, one of their players had gotten knocked by S9 to the north. So I don't understand how initially that might have either slowed them down or at least pushed them back in theory. But when you have been here for quite a while and you realistically control information to both sides or all around you, there's absolutely no reason why, whether on foot or by car, 2 to 3 of the players couldn't have pushed down, gone on this ridge side, and third party to fight against Raw and Stalwart. At the time, they were probably thinking, well, the circle is in our favor. We don't have to move. However, seizing the opportunity and seizing the moment to be a little bit more aggressive and push an engagement and grab a few kills off a third party is going to be much more beneficial to your late game. As it happens, Venom stayed where they are between the circles shifting away. They ended up, I believe, going out before Stalwart. And really losing out on the ability to not only capture more kill points, but capture a lot more placement points by eliminating more of the Stalwart players, pushing them back. By choosing to play more passive, you put the control of your own result in other teams' hands rather than your own. So Venom, I know they were looking to fight for that kind of top 16, so they're a little bit fearful of that. But there's nothing to fear but fear itself. So just pull it out, be aggressive, and you'll be surprised how much you'll be rewarded. This breakdown and analysis is going to be a long one because it deserves to be. DRS's control, not only throughout this game up until this point, but closing out the game, is so good. 26 minutes in, at this point they're around 9 kills up, and they've really controlled the south side of the road and pretty much covered all of the kind of outside of the South River, Yasnaya area. They've just finished off taking out the last of Stalwart. So they know that the only players left are across the road. But it's how they set themselves up with Phase 7 closing in for the next circle that makes a big difference. Right now, they're a little bit more together, but you can see they start to spread out a bit more heavily. AJ sends his vehicle a little bit more to the left. It's in that kind of center of the current Phase 7, so he's thinking proactively ahead himself. Nima drives the buggy closer to the edge of the road with the help of his smoke. That's proactive play for the next circle, and he really does wonders with that. He stays on top of the vehicle while smokes are covering, and you can see Mafia Ninja is holding on to the right hand side of the road. So you have AJ covering elements of the left, you have Mafia Ninja covering elements of the right, and you have Nima covering elements of what's more heavily in front of them, preparing for the next shift. Mr. Boro is doing a great job of using his own utility and his awareness to help his teammates around him. And DRS are also aware that on this side of the circle or this side of the road, it's a lot flatter. So anybody that's around there are going to be easier to take out. Whereas on this side, there's a dip, which makes it harder to expose players. So they're being, once again, pretty proactive. Yes, you could argue they technically had an easier job because you have one team of 4 players on this side of the road and you have 3 teams of 6 players on the north side or the south side of the road. So I get that. However, it's still difficult, in the way they set that up without presuming it was going to be easy is massively well played. So let's continue on and see what happens between DRS and the remaining teams. Nima uses the passenger seat of the buggy to get the knock on the Smokey. Now that's confirmed by Sandesh. So it does take a kill away from DRS. However, that's free information for DRS because they know for a fact that T2K are close by where 7Cs are, where that knock is being pulled out. Very, very adaptable. The last player from 7Cs is on that kind of flatter terrain. Another smoke is thrown out, and you've also got to recognize that at this point, DRS only realistically have 3 smokes. 2 to 3 smokes, maximum 4 at one time. So instead of there being 5, 6, 7 smokes blocking any chance of getting vision, they're more calculated on the smoke usage in this fight until they absolutely have to, because they want to be proactive. You see, Ale can do absolutely nothing. Mafia Ninja gets a kill, and you got to think if there's more smokes around that area, less likely that would have happened as quickly. Now, Nima does get knocked, but because at this point in the game, DRS have been controlling to get the kills and to get the knocks. T2K, they have the dip. They're more cautious. They technically know they don't have to move, but also they don't want to. They're a little bit scared. They've also got to realize that there's still another player around them. With how proactive DRS are being, I can't imagine they think there's a player on the other side of the road from another team. But as it happens, Evil Eye comes in, gets a knock on the Sandesh. It is finished off very quickly by Legend, so credit to them for that. But at this stage, as I said, the opportunity is there for the taking. DRS have kept an eye on the kill feed. They know that Evil Eye has gotten a knock into one of the T2K players, because it certainly wasn't one of them. And then the kill has been finished off by T2K. So they know that T2K are broken, and that's when they throw the smokes out. That's when they start to make the push. Nima sends it on a vehicle to create the bait moment for his side. And AJ does look in the direction on the other side, and although he gets knocked down, Mafia Ninja is there to get the counter knock on the Suyog, leaving it with just one player left for T2K. Legend gets taken out, DRS take the chicken dinner, and all of this is done by being proactive and laying the foundations throughout the early to mid part of the game. DRS couldn't have put a better cherry on top of the cake that was this Erangel game. Really well executed. This final moment in game number 3 is definitely a missed opportunity for High Voltage. Earlier on, about 10, 15, 20 seconds before, they had traded knocks with a member of T2K across the road. So they knew that there was a team across the road pretty much where the 3 players of High Voltage are right now. So by in any way rotating or staying on this part of the hill, they're looking for trouble. That's why initially Havoc does start to move in this direction towards a compound. That's all well and good. They know and they're pretty sure that there's a team in there. Maybe not being sure of how many players, but they do know that there's players inside that compound. However, the missed opportunity is the fact that they only push it with one player at the moment, and there's nobody opting to go on a much deeper right hand side of the circle. Havoc starts to cook up a nade, which is okay, but there's no secondary person with a nade. Yes, someone looks to join with him and he throws out a smoke in a second, but that's a smoke. Why aren't the other 2 players of High Voltage pushing up with them? Time is of the essence. Phase 6 blue zone is starting to close in. As the nade is cooked up, it does connect onto Mamba, but that's instantly alerting Venom to the fact that a team is behind them. So that's allowing them time to prepare. And that's the thing. So in the time that it takes for Ozzy and Extreme to in any way get closer to the rest of his team, Venom are preparing for a defense. A smoke goes out here by Frypan to cover behind them. A first aid is being laid out by Mamba. Steelshot is able to cover a little bit to the right because he's had time to prepare. So the element of surprise is completely lost. Now, Wadu does get a knock onto one of the T2K. Actually, sorry, confirms the kill onto the T2K player across there. Yeah, okay, that's a point. Doesn't really mean anything. But that's the thing. It's far too late for them to really kind of push because they've alerted Venom. And even then, once again, they're not using this side of the circle. They're not using this side of the compound. Wadu does get a knock on the Steelshot. That's pretty valuable. But as you can see, Ozzy gets knocked by T2K and confirmed because Ozzy is far too slow to push with the rest of his team. And that's what I was talking about. And that puts High Voltage instantly down to 3 players. It leaves their ability to push that fight against Venom so much harder. Extreme gets knocked then, and that puts them down to 2, so it is still a 2v2. Havoc goes down, Wadu is left on his own, Mamba cleans it up, or Frypan. Either way, that fight is cleaned up simply because they didn't push both aggressively, fast enough, and in the right direction. High voltage, great theory, poor execution, my friends. In this clip, I want to highlight how adaptive and proactive and reactive Raw were to the plane path and the circle shift. The plane path, as you can see, was quite heavily on the eastern side of the map, going from north to south. Raw decided to drop on the Kameshki side of the map, so when phase 1 popped up, that was kind of more towards the west. What did that say to them? There's more than likely going to be a cluster of teams on the eastern side of the phase 1 circle, on the eastern half. That makes our entry point into the phase 1, if we choose to stick to a south of the river eastern shift, a lot more difficult, because although we're technically one of the first teams to drop, that rotation time, when we know DRS is in Yasnaya, is going to be a lot longer. So what they choose to do is, although they're not the super quickest on their rotation from phase 1 to phase 2, what they do is they use their intelligence to substitute that time for a safer, more intelligent rotation into the northwestern edge of the phase 1 circle. Now, as you can see, this is the phase 2 pop, and yes, they do benefit from the phase 2 shift, once again going to the northwest. But even if it had have been an eastern shift, they still would have been fine on that rotation, because they could have come in from the west, located around the ruins area, and they would have been much safer than a lot of teams, and they would have grabbed a lot more information. Great adaptability from Raw. Not enough teams do it, so when I see it, I love pointing it out. Very often, it's easy to highlight a team's aggression when another team are being a little bit too passive or just not as aggressive themselves, and this is one of the examples. It's Vibes against 7Cs. Phase 4 Blue Zone is closing in. 7Cs have been in this position around the west of Pachinki field, or hill should I say, since phase 4. Vibes have come from pretty far away, to be fair, the north of Pachinki. But they stop and they open the fight up with a knock on Smokey. And they look to push it. Now, Assassin does get himself knocked down. But here's what I absolutely love about Vibes with the focus they have in play. There's another team that is looking to shoot in their direction. Whether or not they know it's another team, it doesn't matter. But look at Ale and how kind of obviously out of position he was on his own, but even just how passive he is to try and move away and turn things around. Jiggle gets in the other side. Killer, of course, looks to cook up a smoke, but this is just really strong play. Prabin in the front line. Jiggle joins up, helps to push things forward, and at this stage, Smokey's knocked down, Ale is finished off, Memo and Fear are the only two players up able to do anything. Fear is prone down, afraid to push forward, even though they know for a fact that Vibes are there. Memo's in the back line, but when you are at a losing point in the game and you know a team is pushing up on you in an advantageous situation, honestly, that backline position just isn't really valuable enough. And he knows it's compromised because he throws out his smoke. Now, Vibes do look to get the revive off onto Assassin, but it doesn't stop Prabin and Killer pushing forward, right? So the other two players of Vibes are doing a great job of stopping 7Cs from really getting into this game across the board. It's great kind of double counter play. Prabin takes a little bit of damage, but it doesn't really stop him too much from slowing down across this way. As we move on to the fight, they look to reposition because their backup is a full squad, so they send it towards a higher ground area. Juggle takes a bit of damage, but it doesn't matter. The breach has been made. They have a much stronger area on the hill than 7Cs. Yes, they were able to get a revive, but that double knock from Assassin was absolutely perfect, and that is simply off the fact that they repositioned to a higher area, got the angles, got the double knock. And yes, okay, they have two players knocked themselves, but 7Cs are down to one and they absolutely know it. So they continue on and they end up taking down 7Cs. It really is a lesson in one, taking a bit of a risk. There was a lot of risks taken by Vibes in that moment. But when a team like 7Cs are not really being aggressive enough to control their position in the circle to a team entering from the western side out of the circle, they pay the price, and a team like Vibes are going to feed off that. And it was really a starting point for Vibes being very aggressive coming into the edge of the circle, because all throughout the remainder of that game, that's what they did, and I believe they ended up with 15 kills. Well played, Vibes, but 7Cs learn to recognize when you need to puff your chest up and become a bit more aggressive. For this clip, once again to highlight i8's learning from previous days' mistakes and using their position in the circle to push teams back earlier on in the game, so that when it came to a later stage, they were able to focus on another team in a much more effective manner. We're 21.5 minutes into the game. However, 2 to 3 minutes before that, i8 had done a great job of pushing back and punishing T2K across the road at Pachinki. They hadn't squad wiped them. However, they had done enough damage to the point where T2K were in absolutely no position to push up that side of Pachinki Hill. So what that allowed i8 to do, that allowed them to focus a lot more heavily on a team coming up from the northeastern edge of Pachinki Hill. Now, Uzum at this point is a little bit out of place, but I respect where he is, but just a little bit out of place, and he pays the price getting knocked by Sinor with an Uzi from that distance is great. However, the response from i8 is fantastic. They do end up cleaning out T2K as it happens, so again, they can focus a little bit more heavily on this S9 fight. Uzum is yet to be finished off, and you could argue that maybe they focused a little bit too much on trying to clean up Uzum instead of, you know, setting themselves up a little bit more. Crypto, I believe it is, gets knocked with a nade onto Inky. So instead of Crypto, who taking a little bit of damage, instead of Crypto trying to go for the heal, he cooks up a nade. So this is once again really proactive play, and he gets another knock on the Monkey. Instantly, another nade by Crypto. He does have Blade by his side, so the confidence of having a team there is so valuable. Now, S9 do make a fatal error of bringing their knocked players closer to their up players and sticking together. The second I saw that, I was like, yeah, they're screwed in general. So that was definitely a mistake from S9, and you see another knock and a kill going out. But Crypto's proactivity in this is so good. He takes a bit of a risk. He finds one. He finds a squad wipe. But again, Blade was right behind him. So I8 stuck together, pushed forward, and got the squad wipe. It was a beautiful 1v4 by Crypto. However, his teammate Blade was right behind him, having his back. And it was all off the back of I8 covering the other side by taking out T2K. Focus, purpose, one fight at a time, covering your angles, boom. And they ended up the game, I think, with something like 15 kills. Really good. This analysis and breakdown is an interesting one because I myself have a little bit of uncertainty about what Paradox maybe should have done better in terms of positioning in this fight. I wonder, should they have given up the warehouse at this point? Earlier on, one of the Paradox players, Hazard, got knocked by A1. That's what opened up the push by A1 coming in from the south across the road. So I'm initially thinking, should Paradox have given up that warehouse? Because it's a very tricky building to really defend. You can defend it. It's also not the easiest to breach. But in my eyes, it's a little bit harder to defend. I will say Paradox do have a pretty good level of control with Hazard and Wiz beside each other on the side of the warehouse. So they are really slowing down and pinching A1, and they even got the knock onto Dante. However, the first big mistake that Paradox make, which A1 fully capitalize on, is coming up. Give is still healing. He's up, but he's healing. Yet Queet decides to peek out and gets knocked by Sinister. At this point, boom. A1 go, okay. It doesn't matter if we have a player knocked. We've created the opening through the doorway. They go in through the doorway, they send two in. Once again, they know that they've yet to get the revive onto Dante, but it doesn't matter. Because again, they've opened the door. Give is far too passive at this stage. He should be distracting A1. Maybe they think that the revive has been pulled off onto Dante, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. He needs to create a distraction for Hazard to Wiz, and Wiz to reposition or to play around a bit more aggressively. As it happens, he does do that, but he gets knocked. So that's obviously a mistake in his eyes, and it is what it is. But that still opens the door, and once again, A1 have not gotten the revive onto Dante. I believe they do now. They do indeed. A1 do exactly what they need to do. I gotta say that Paradox initially do an okay job, and Wiz tries to get away, but he's left on his own. It's a 1v4 and A1 close it out. Again, I'm left wondering myself if Paradox should have moved away from the warehouse completely the second they let A1 breach to the side of the warehouse, especially after getting the knock onto Dante. However, Queef's mistake was the biggest F and the reason why they ultimately lost that fight so cohesively. That's another video done for the PMPL Season 4 South Asia Analysis. I'm not going to have an analysis video for the first day of the Super Weekend, but I should have an analysis video for day 2 and day 3. I'm excited. The 16 teams that made it in, what can they do from there? Thanks again. Stay safe, stay awesome. I'll see you guys in the next video.